to the Djinn's treasure. Finally, I apologize. I have been gone for far too long and I am back now. And furthermore, I am committed because I am tired of saying that I've been gone for too long. So I am making a promise to you. I am committed to doing at least one video a week moving forward. It's just been quite a process in my personal life, so I apologize for all that. But without further ado, here we go. Today we're gonna do a simple wire wrap, and we're gonna be wire wrapping this Opalite with our silver plated copper wires. So we have the 24 gauge, which is the thinner of the two, and then the 20 gauge. And these are the brands that I use. You could find these online quite easily. And then we're also going to be using, I've misplaced my favorite pliers, which is a 3-in-1 pliers. So we're just going to use the 3 individuals. So we have our clips, our flats, and our needle nose pliers. So to begin, we're gonna do, so I did find some of this this anizes. This is from the last spool. This is what's left over, and it's gonna be just enough that we'll be able to use all of this and have enough to complete the wrap. In fact, as my #1 rule goes, it's always better to overestimate the amount of wire rather than to get it precise, because if you try to go precise and you get it wrong, well, then you run out of wire before you get to finish, and that's an unfortunate thing. So as you can see, this is about the amount of wire, well, more so than you will need for something of a wrap for this size. What we're going to be doing is turning this Opalite into an Opalite pendant. And so the idea is that we want to have enough wire that it could wrap around the Opalite twice. So yeah, as you can see, I'll move these pliers out of the way. I'll move this Opalite closer. As you can see, this is probably enough wire to do that twice over. And so what I mean by that is, if we create so that there's 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, you can see there's 4 strands and they still fit all around that Opalite. So that's definitely more than enough, because we're only going to need to do it twice. So as you noticed, I have already kind of folded the wire over. So what I do is kiss the 2 tip ends together and kind of do a zip tie, sliding all the way down to get this loop at the other end. And what we're going to do is take our clips and just clip that loop in half. So now we have 2 more or less equidistant wires, or equal in length wires. And this is, again, this is the 20 gauge wire. So we'll set that aside for now. And then with our 24 gauge wire, I'm gonna take off a little bit of the spool, and let's see, I'm gonna try something I've never done before, but I think it will make sense. So I've reversed the camera, and then that way I can slide back and give you the whole spectrum of what I'm doing. So I have, as you can see, the wire, the tip end of the wire is here, wedged between these 2 fingers, and I'm just gonna pull like I call it the bow and arrow. So you pull like you're drawing a bow and arrow, and about that much length of wire is what you're gonna need. Well, it's gonna be more than what you need, but it'll at least be enough. So then we can, you can see on the spool there's a little divot there, so I just slide the remaining wire in there, and then I'll take my clips and then clip that off and tuck that wire so it's nice and neat. It's not going to come unraveled. If you noticed, when that spool is left unattended, it will kind of just unravel on its own. If you notice, it kind of did that already, but not enough that it was made it an issue or anything. All right, switching it back over. So now we have our two 20 gauge wires, and then we have our 24 gauge wire, which I've already done the kissing of the tips, and then once again we zip tie all the way to find that loop at the bottom. But instead of what we did last time where we clipped, we're just gonna thread both of those 20 gauge wires through very carefully. So you can see it's threaded through, and we're just gonna eyeball more or less what's the middle, so we can kiss all 4 tips together here, and then we'll just give a little tug, and you see how that's kind of creating all naturally on its own. So when I'm pulling tension here and here, and you can see how it kind of forces this loop to meet right more or less in the middle. So it doesn't have to be perfect, and that's a beautiful thing. Art should never be perfect. Well, maybe, I don't know. Kind of sounds more like nature's perfection, and we're the imperfections, right? But we're striving for that perfection. So try to get it somewhere in the middle, but it doesn't have to be precise. That's all I'm saying. So from here, what we're gonna do is begin our first coil. So you can see there we have our first coil. This one here on the right that's kind of popping out at an angle, that's not a full coil because that's just where the wire folds, and it's just right there. So this one being our first full coil, what we're gonna do is do that again. And I'm doing this in such a way, let's see if I can get the focus down. There we go. Oh, cool. So I'm doing this in such a way that's slow motion and long and tedious, but at least I'm getting the clean coils. So by clean coils, what I mean is, here, I'll bring it back closer. You'll notice that first coil, there's a bit of a gap between the next 3. You want to have those tucked in nice and tight. So if you're noticing that there's gappage, then what you can do is I'm pinching down on the 20 gauge wires with all my fingers here, and then I'm just gonna slide them all in together like that. And then I can continue to coil. Now this is more so a beginner's tutorial, so take your time if you are a beginner, or if you are, if this is not your first rodeo, then you are welcome to go at a little bit of a faster pace. I'm noticing that bit of a trouble with the focus. So this is my first video in a while, and new station. I'm here in the beautiful city of Chicago, perhaps the only beautiful city in the United States. I don't know. I don't have much of a experience, really just San Francisco and Los Angeles, coming from California, but now I'm here in the great city of Chicago. All right, so once we get a few coils down, what we're gonna do is switch up, or you don't have to if you don't want to, but if you feel comfortable, you can switch up and get your flat pliers involved. And what we do here, I'm gonna have to adjust the angle a little bit. All right, so that way we have a little bit more focus on the camera. So you can see what I'll do is pinch down that coiled portion on the flats and give it a little bit of a squeeze just for the grip. And again, you don't have to try this. This is just one other technique that I prefer for kind of getting the coils done faster. I find that the sturdy grip of the flats, the flat pliers, are better than my rounded and oily fingers. And then we also want to make sure that we don't do too many coils, because sometimes we get into that repetitive grind, and then we look up and it's like, oh, we've coiled all the way out to here before we realize we needed to stop and work on the next step. So the next step is going to be kind of placing our egg-shaped opalite on top of that wire frame. The coiled portion is the wired frame, and we're just gonna kind of shape it to that lower dip of our opal. And I can see I'm good on the coils building out this way, and what I want to do is actually switch it up and start coiling using this wire. That way we maintain a balance of this 24 gauge, right? So when we coil along this length, it eats up the length of this 24 gauge wire. So we want to make sure that the length of this wire maintains a balanced length with this wire. In order to do that, what we do is switch it around. So now you can see what's switched is the coils have been going outwards, eating this length of wire, and now we're going to switch up and start coiling using this wire. And again, you can use either the pliers, the flat technique, or if you're more comfortable, some people are more comfortable with the just using their fingers. Either way, one thing that's important is that your coiled portion can sometimes slide. So let me give you an example. I'll dip right here. So you can see right at the tip of that V is where this coiled portion is finished, but sometimes it slides. So be careful of that as you coil along. And we're just coiling along. Like Dory from Finding Nemo, just keep coiling, but not too much. Just enough that it kind of evens out with the amount of coils here, or even maybe a little bit less so. I'll show you what I mean in a second after I get those coils. And again, if you're noticing gaps within your coils, you can just pinch your fingers on the 20 gauge wires and slide them in, and it's kind of like a slinky. It just pushes them all together. So now that I've got a few coils down, another thing I like to do, especially if I'm doing it by hand, is just get those flats in there. Just get them involved because they're itching to get involved. So what you're gonna do is just do a little pinch and massage, and that way what that does is it flattens the coils around the 20 gauge wires. But not only that, it also, sometimes your 20 gauge wires, when they're getting coiled around in there, it gets really tight and then they tend to cross, and you don't want that. You want them to remain flat and parallel with each other, just as you can see here. It's flat and parallel, so this one is the top and this one is the bottom, coming in on this end and then coming out on this end. Let's get the focus right. Coming out, it remains the same, so it's that top is the same one that's the top over here coming out, and then the bottom that goes in is the same, that's the bottom coming out. That just means inside this coiled portion, it didn't get twisted. Although I suppose if you wanted to try that out and see if that becomes like a new creative style, there's no rules against that. You could go ahead and try that. You're welcome to, but I haven't yet, so I can't verify whether or not that's going to turn out good. Maybe one day off camera I'll try it out, and if it works, and I'll post it on, record it, and say like, hey guys, this is the new style. But for now, we're sticking with this basic style. So now what we're going to do is, once again, we're going to take our opalite and place it on top, and you can see how I've kind of curved the wire to match the curve of the opalite itself. It's not exact, but you do want to make sure that's exact. It's just, for me, I'm going to have to set this crystal down and kind of dip my fingers in there to kind of more mold the shape. And then we'll get that crystal back involved. And I use that term crystal very loosely because this is opalite after all, which is synthetic. It's a synthetic imitation of opal, which is a very high-end and real crystal. In fact, I could probably show you some, but it's bagged up right now. Maybe next time. All right, so now you can see that that shape is looking good. What we want to do now, this is especially works well for those cabochons or those cut shapes, because they generally have a very flat, little bit of an arc, whereas this is like clearly the flat side. Here, get those wires involved because it's messing up the focus of the camera. So you can see how it's very flat on one side. There's a little bit of a bulge or a dome on the other end. So with that more or less flat shape, it's safe to say that if we do this next step without the crystal, it should be okay. So this next step, sometimes you want to have, especially for those awkward shaped crystals like this one. Let's get the focus right. So this is a type of agate, Botswana agate, I believe, and you can see it's just a tumbled crystal. There's no cut shape or, I mean, there is flat sides, but it's not like, it's like an awkward or odd shaped stone. There's no geometric shape to it. Like, here's another example of what I mean. Looks like this one's a labradite. So you can see these are just awkward or tumbled, just generic tumbled shapes. Not like any, it's not gonna be like a perfect oval with a perfectly flat shape. Anyways, I digress, let's continue. So we get it in there and we see that the frame is built matching. So because this is a cabochon, which is that cut shape, I feel confident that we can start the next step without the crystal. Now, if you're using a tumbled or awkward shaped stone, I do recommend at least trying to keep that stone in place. I know from experience how difficult that can be. So this next step, what we're gonna do is the wire, the 24 gauge wire that we've been coiling outwards on this end, we're gonna swing it around the back side and try to make this wire as flat as possible, ideally, but you don't want to pull so hard that it actually like bends the frame. We're just gonna gently, with a good amount of tension, bring it over here and then coil it around that side. In fact, we'll do it two times to make it extra secure. And then as you see with my fingernail, I'm just doing that same thing where I tuck in any of those gaps. And then what we're gonna do is this bottom wire, it's really important that we don't confuse these two, right? So this is the wire that we brought over, hence why it's on top. We've completed that step for now. So now we're gonna do the same thing with the other wire, bringing it over around the front. And by front, I just mean like here's the front and here's the back. And here's the wire, defining the difference between the front and the back. So the back and the front. So we're bringing this wire around the front and we're gonna do the same thing. Just coil around and wanna make those coils kinda nice and tight as you can. Remember, we're doing 2 coils to maintain that symmetry. And there we have, you can see there's a bit of a gap there between the front and the back. And the idea is, that's where you drop the crystal in, right? So we have a little bit of a threshold here where it's kind of like this wire serves as a lip that catches the stone and keeps it in place. But something I've recently discovered is that instead of doing 1 wire, it looks more aesthetically pleasing if we do 2. So we're gonna do that same last 2 steps over again. So this time, this wire is gonna come around the front just as it did when it was this wire coming around. So we're gonna bring that around, coil it twice, make sure those coils are tucked in. That's what I'm doing with my fingernail there, right? And we actually will end up doing more coils, but we'll stop at 2 just because like that's the secure amount. And now we're gonna take, remember not to confuse the two wires. So the wire that we just worked on is always gonna be that top wire. So now we're gonna take the bottom wire and bring that around the backside. and then attach it to the other side. Make sure those coils are nice and tucked in. And another thing, sometimes if you work it back and forth, that also helps as you tuck it in, right? It's kind of like a wrench, twisting in a nut, tightening in that nut. So now you can see there's 4 wires coming across. So 2 in the back and 2 in the front. Although those 2 in the front, it might be a little difficult to see. There we go. Now you can see there's a split. So 2 and 2. Now we're ready to drop our crystal in, and that looks pretty good. We're gonna go ahead and shape the rest of the wire frame around the sides. And the idea is that these 2 are far enough from the base or the very bottom, but they're also not going to eat away at they're not coming right across the middle. So the idea is that there's a little bit of a gap, but not enough that the crystal could actually slide through or pop out, right? I could try to force this and it might work, but that's only because this is incomplete. So what we're gonna do now is complete it. What I like to do is, I call this the bowl horns or the long horns, by just going up the length and then bending these outwards. And the idea is that if I don't do that, generally these 2 wires coming up the sides, they'll want to cross over at the top, and that makes it impossible to do any coiling between those 2 wires. So I create the long horns, and that way it's like there's room for my hand to come sliding through as I continue to coil along. And then from this point, I like to get my flats involved. I'm just more comfortable wrapping that way. It also makes sure that these coils here are kind of pressed flat, which is more ideal. And then as well, these wires are less likely to get twisted. So I'm gonna pinch down here, and then once again I'll do a little bit of adjustment with the camera angle here, give myself some room to work with. And then from here I'm just coiling around. So let's see if we could get a closer look in there without losing too much of the focus. So you can see I've pinched down on that coiled portion, and then I'm just using my other hand to coil. And if you notice what I'm doing with my pointer finger here, it serves as kind of a guide, and that helps make sure that these coils stay tucked in nice and neat with each other and there's no gaps. Although if there are gaps, that's fine. That's when you just do that same technique of pinching on the wire and then pushing it all in. Once I get a few coils out, I'm gonna release my pliers and then slide them over and then reapply them right to the base. And I'll do this maybe, for this size crystal, maybe 3 times. I'll probably stop at 2 times just to make sure I'm not overdoing it, because we really don't want to. If we end up doing too many coils, then we have to uncoil it, and then those coiled portions, it's going to be like that mangled wire, and that mangled wire is going to show because that's the wire that's coming across. See how these wires are nice and straight? Well, it's going to be all jagged if it's some coiled and uncoiled wire. So we want to avoid that. So there we go. Push them in and then just give a little push down with those flat pliers. And then we're just gonna test by putting the stone back in place. And I could see I'm almost there. I'm almost all the way to the top. I also want to make sure that on the bottom here, that the crystal is fully touching the bottom of the framework. And I can see maybe a few more coils to meet where it's almost like symmetric or reverse of what's happening at the bottom, right? Because the idea is not to go all the way to the top, but just far enough away that the whole crystal wouldn't be able to pop out the top either, right? So you see that's how I have this set on the bottom, just wide enough or just thin enough that the width of the crystal won't pop through. And I'm gonna shoot for the same idea at the top here. But before we continue the coils here, we're gonna switch and get the coils here to be to coil along all the way up to here. So here's what it looks like if you're just using your fingers. And I'm going a little bit faster now, but it is the same technique. So if you're like, whoa, he's going too fast and I didn't see it, well, you could just go back to the beginning of this video and see how I did it. But I also did kind of slow down as well. I'll just slow down. I don't want you to have to go back and forth. I wouldn't want to. I'd probably stop watching the video at that point. And the idea for me as a content creator is to create a video that truly serves its purpose. It's educational, it's giving you the tutorial for how to do this. And I don't want to create some sections and chapters for you to be able to refer back to. Like, I'm not some terrible teacher. I never liked it when they did that in school. So why would I want to force that on you guys? So that was the hand technique. Here is the pliers technique that I was showing you before, which I'm more comfortable with. I feel like the grip I have here is a lot more sturdy rather than, you know, my fingers that, you know, can slide around the wire easily. Not quite so with the flatness of the metal pliers. And even if you are doing that hand technique, you'll have to get those flats involved anyway, just to do this little pinch and massage that I'm doing. That kind of locks the coils in place. All right, so let's see. That looks pretty parallel with each other. Let's see how it looks with the crystal drop in. So we drop that guy in, and it's looking pretty good. By the way, if you were wondering, I don't know if I said it already, but this is silver-plated copper wire. I currently almost exclusively work with copper wire, and in that I include gold-plated and silver-plated copper wire. And as I said, I will do a few more coils towards the top, because I would say if I were try to bring these coils across now, they would be like how this one is. It would be so. Come on, get the focus right. All right, so if I were to do these coils a little bit more up as opposed to down low at the base here, it would be too much of a gap right there that the crystal potentially could slide through that gap. So we really don't want that, because then you're walking along wearing your really cool jewelry that you made yourself, and then next thing you know, you're left with just the wire frame. The crystal had slipped out, which nobody wants that. Nobody wants to lose something, not if they could help it. All right, so I did a few more coils, and I'll press down to kind of massage that and press that into place. And then I'll switch up and do the flats technique, holding it with the flats and coiling with my other hand. Making sure I don't do too much. And press that. Okay, I think this will be it. I also, if you notice, I just switched the wireframe around, and I could feel that this one is more of that arc, whereas down here is the more flat end. So I want to keep that aligned. And then from here, we're almost done. From here, we're gonna once again do bring one side around the back to the other side. And again, I'm doing the long horns, bending them outwards so that way I can really give a lot of tension. And then I can just wrap right in between the two frame sides. So this could be a little bit difficult, especially for a beginner. Just take your time with it. Remember, we want to do 2 coils and then we stop. And we want to have it come across as tight as possible, but not too tight. Not so tight that it no longer fits the crystal. Then we're going to bring the other one. Remember, it's the bottom one because we finished the top one. So this bottom 24 gauge wire is going to come across the front, and then carefully, right now I'm using my back finger to hold that wire that came across the back in place, because if I release it, you can see how, if you look carefully, see how there's a gap right there? I don't want that gap, because any amount of that gap is gonna make it so that this whole, it just throws it off in such a way that it doesn't look good. So I'm gonna place my finger there, pinning this wire wedged between my finger and the crystal. And now I'm ready to bring this one around the front. And carefully coil twice. And then before I continue, I'll just examine that and make sure if there's any adjustments that need to be made, that this is the time to make them. Speak now or forever hold your peace. And I do see that it's a little bit too much. It's a little bit off skew from one thing, and it's a little bit too close to the tip. There's not much to do about that. Just try not to let that happen. It will be okay ultimately. It's just that now that I want to bring another, bring this one around the backside once more to keep that symmetry of 2 on the bottom and 2 on the top, it makes it a little bit tough. But hopefully we can make it work. So there, I've done 2 coils coming around the backside, and that is for the second one. So you can see how it's kind of already at the tip there. So that will be the top wire, the top 24 gauge wire, and then the bottom one is the one that comes around the front. And we want to make sure that this coiled here, you see how there's a little bit of a gap? We really don't want any of that gap. So this is a little bit of a tricky situation trying to hold that down. I'm just using my fingernail. And now we're just gonna coil, coil, and coil. Making sure, oh, and that's another thing too. One thing, if you notice, sometimes you'll notice, here, I did a mistake on purpose just for demonstration's sake. So if you notice that if any of during your coiling, you get something that looks like this, what happened is you were coiling all in the same direction going up along the flow, and then at some point the wire actually went backwards and reversed and then wrapped around the already coiled portion and then continued. So that is how you get something like that, which is, I mean, I don't know if you would want to do that intentionally. I can't think of any reason why you would, But if that happens, you're just gonna have to unwind all the way back to that part and recoil it properly so that the coil continues to go in one direction upwards. So I've definitely coiled enough on this end, and now I'm gonna coil and match the same amount on this end, or maybe not so much the same amount, but just enough that these two coiled portions can fold over the top and come together. And in fact, I'll pull the 24 gauge wires, I'm pulling them down just so they're out of the way. And then now I'm tugging on the two 20 gauge wires to bring them together to meet right at the top. And if the coiled portions don't fully meet each other, that's okay. In fact, that's better than to over coil it, because I'll show you why. So once we have these two 20 gauge wires crossing, we're gonna give like a little twist, just one twist, right? So now they've folded over, and let's get the focus on there so you can see what that looks like. And then these 24 gauge coils, actually before we do that, what we'll do is pick a side, any side, either the right or the left, and what you're gonna do is create like a little roller coaster loop to loop just with your fingers, or you could use your pliers if you find that to be more helpful. But you see how I created that loop to loop, right? And the idea is that this loop to loop is where the chain or lace will get threaded through, and we want to make sure that our loop to loop comes forward and backwards as opposed to side to side. We want it to come forward and backward, as you can see I've done here, right? So now that we've got that loop to loop secured, we're gonna take our other 20 gauge wire and just wrap it around like a scarf. I always think of this part, come on, focus. This part as like a head, and then the crystal is the body. So between the head and the body is the neck, so that 20 gauge, or these two 20 gauge are wrapping around the neck like a scarf. So we'll bring it up closer. You can see how that looks. Nice and neat, and it's also secured that loop to loop so it won't come undone. And then from there you can, if you'd like, you could just clip off your 24 gauge wires. You can just clip them off, or what I like to do is just give it one more time, just a once around each, just following that theme of the scarf. So here is what that looks like. Here's my two 24 gauge wires, and they came around just as the scarf did. All right, I'm gonna readjust this angle. We're almost done. I think the camera is trying to be so smart that it like adjusts the focus, but it ends up focusing on stuff further away. So there, we could see that worked well. And we are ready to get our clips involved and clip off the excess. Now when I clip off the excess, I always leave these nubs here, and the intention behind that is that it's enough of a nub that I can take my needle nose pliers and just pinch the tip of the pliers to the tip of the wire and give a little curl. So let's see, there's that curl. You see how this one has curled inwards, and then that's the other pokey tip. So we're gonna do the same thing with the other pokey tip, curling it. So that's what it looks like when they're both curled. And then we get our flats involved. And the idea is that we kind of tuck those curls in, and the pokey tip is no longer a pokey tip. It's been tucked in. Good night. And then we can now we can really play with like our own style. Like for example, these 2 wires, what I'll generally do is, that's kind of like my signature, is I'll clip off, like once again, leaving some pokey tips. But these pokey tips, although they will get curled, they get curled into these little spiral finishes. So you see how that one, I just curled it. And again, to go over the technique of the curling, it's tip the pliers to the tip of the wire, and then you just rotate the pliers, right? And you could even pinch down and rotate it again. And the idea is the first one that I do gets tucked in underneath the scarf, and then the second one gets tucked in underneath the first one, as you can see how I did it there. And that way, your jewelry has no pokey tips. And then lastly, we have the scarf. And the scarf I like to do just like once all those coils are complete, I'll do a few more scarf wraps just to make sure that all the tips are fully covered, and then do the same thing as I did here. So I'll clip off the rest, and be careful, sometimes the wire does shoot. And you could do one at a time, or you could do them both at the same time. I'm gonna go for both. And again, it's the tip to the tip, tip to tip, right? And then you curl that around. And the idea is that it just curls around this framework. And then finally, some final touches using the flats to really get those tucked in. And then we have our wire wrap with some extra wire. And the cool thing about these extra wires is if you have like a matching stone, here's the other wire. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You could use these wires potentially to twist in some matching earrings. So if you have an opalite stone and some opalite beads, I have some beads around, but they're tucked away somewhere, so I'm not gonna bother looking for them. But I'm saying, like, you know, if you had whatever stone this is, if you have this stone here and then the same stone and some beads, you could turn these into beads, which maybe I'll do that for my next video. Bye for now, and thank you. Oh, and by the way, I am working on getting my Djinn's Treasure website online store up and running, so I'll keep you posted on the updates with that. But thank you for tuning in. Bye.